Hello, welcome back to my channel. For the first time I've shown my face on this channel, in this vlog series thing. I've certainly picked an interesting appearance. But I wanted to show, this is what I've been like all day and all of yesterday, because there's a heat wave here in the UK right now. And although I do have an aircon unit, which you may or may not be able to hear in the background, one, it isn't super powerful, so it can't cope with temperatures of 33 degrees. That's Celsius, obviously. And also, the building I'm in, being a British building, is made to keep heat in, so I keep waking up and finding it's over 30 degrees in my flat. And I am not built for that. That is very bad for me. So any hope of having any kind of function doesn't occur for much of it. So I've been asleep for most of it, which is good because, sleep is good for me and I don't get tons of it. But I am going to attempt now to do something so that I don't feel quite as shit as I do. I'm in a ton of pain, but I, as you can see, really want and need a shower. Thankfully I have a shower stool, so I can do a lot of it sitting down. Because I don't think my back would let me stand up for that long right now because of the pain I'm in. And then it sort of refers down to my legs, or it's the other way around, and my legs refer up to my back. They take it in turns. It's a fun cycle. But yeah, I want to do that, and then I want to sort of just talk through some of my plans for this chapter without any preparation, so we can see just what comes out of my brain. I've got my PhD notebook here, my current PhD notebook, because I've got a stack of all the ones I've been through so far. And we're just going to talk through it, and I'm going to use that as a kind of springboard to start taking the discussion we had in my supervision and moving that onward to do something with it, assuming that I can turn this into something that can think coherently, because that's not where I am right now. And my arms are also struggling to hold my phone up now. So I'm going to go and attempt to do that, and we'll see what I manage. I'll be back shortly. Hello, I am back, and I have managed to shower. As you can see, I look significantly more socially acceptable now. And I'm exhausted. It took me over an hour between showering and then recovering from showering. But we are now here. So, and the reason I wanted to include that is that often the trouble I'm having with my PhD as a disabled researcher is nothing to do with the actual knowledge production or the research itself, and it's entirely to do with am I am I too exhausted to think? Have I managed to get out of bed? I will be going back to bed after this, or hopefully managing to get some food and then going back to bed. It's things like that, and often I feel bad sometimes. So I have an academic mentor. You can sit there, mister. I have an academic mentor, and a lot of the time she and I end up talking about my home life effectively, because that's the thing that has the biggest impact on my work, and by helping me with that and supporting me there, and how I manage being disabled alongside this work, that's more helpful to me than any study strategies or things that she might normally do with other students. And I often find myself going into supervisions and saying, I'm very sorry, I've had a bit of trouble this, past couple of months because of whatever. And I know the next couple of months is going to be hard because I got some test results back, and I've got to make some pretty radical diet changes, and I have quite disordered eating. It's one of my coping mechanisms is with comfort food, and that's going to be very hard to turn around. But I need to for my well-being. So I'm conscious that the next couple of months are going to be hard, which makes it awkward that this is also a hard bit of the research. Because as I mentioned in my initial video, the problem is I need to care about what I think. So let me summarize first of all. If you've not seen or heard me talk about my PhD elsewhere, I talked about what the thesis itself is about last time. Hang on, this is wonky and it's really annoying me. Why are you? What that'll do? So my thesis has 4 main chapters, which I think I mentioned before. Each chapter has a media type that it focuses on and an aspect of the MAD experience. So that's not a symptom. I'm very careful to not use symptomatic words. So it will be, for example, my video games chapter focuses on dissociation and delusion and experiences of altered states of being and psychosis, to use a more medical term. Then the fanfiction chapter is about mood and emotion, and especially struggling with extremes of mood and emotion. And this chapter, the visual novel chapter, was initially going to be about something else, but I found that it is now about identity and relationships, both with others and with yourself, and the construction of MAD identity and how that identity is then related to and reflected by other people. And the 2 visual novels I've got for looking at that are Slay the Princess and The Song of Sire. They do this in extremely different ways. They are very different visual novels. They're both horror, but Slay the Princess has a lot more permutations than Song of Sire effectively has 2 versions. There's then 2 endings in one of the versions. I am going to talk about the plot of these visual novels, so I may spoil them for you. I apologise if that happens. Go play Slay the Princess first. I wouldn't necessarily recommend you go play Song of Sire. It's is complicated. I don't think that's a negative thing. I was talking about this in my supervision and can get into this more in a bit. But yeah, as I was getting to find these visual novels and going, these are definitely the ones I want to study, there's loads in them that is really interesting in what they do with madness. Neither is explicitly about madness. This is very much me as a MAD researcher reading my experience into it, but also taking some keywords. I would say Song of Sire is the closest to being about madness, but it's specifically about a guy who's had his brain altered by an extra-dimensional being. So it is about madness, but it's really about his experience of that. And 1 second, because my neck is hurting being in this position, so I'm just going to move. Alright, that's better. So, neither is explicitly about madness, but they both, so Slay the Princess, by comparison, has you reconstructing the identity of the protagonist and the primary antagonist, the princess, in rerunning and reliving. The whole thing about visual novels being designed for you to replay them and see different permutations is really inherent to Slay the Princess in a way that's really interesting. It's fundamentally about working out who you are, working out who the antagonist is, and who you are in relation to each other. And part of this is achieved by listening to internal voices. That does And this is something I'm by no means an expert on, and very much something I'm in a process of learning about. I feel like it reflects some elements of a plural experience, not directly necessarily, but that sense of plural identity is has a presence there. And they're really, really interesting visual novels. And I think what's happened is, so I did some basic research into visual novels initially. I then spent quite a long time finding my two primary sources. And I don't it's hard. I don't regret the time I spent doing that, but I do feel nervous about being behind. But I always feel nervous about being behind. So that's, and then every year I have end of year reviews each year, which fall in weird times because I started in January but also took a 3-month intermission at one point. So my end of year reviews are in April, generally, and I've gotten a distinction in every one of them. So, or they kind of have a grading system, and you can either pass with distinction or go into academic probation, or the equivalent thereof. That's not the term that's used, but it's that kind of thing. And I keep getting exemplary progress, which is the equivalent of distinction. So, I feel weird saying that about myself because I think of myself as not doing very well at this sort of thing. So I found these two novels, and then I went, because I deliberately set out to pick, I knew I wanted Slay the Princess at that point, and I went, I do not want to study visual novels without including a Japanese origin visual novel, because visual novels as a medium come from Japan, and I don't want to do that awful Anglo-centric thing of going, here's just a load of originally English-speaking visual novels. So Song of Saya, or Saya no Uta, that's probably terrible pronunciation, and I apologise. I don't speak... Well, the only Japanese terms I know are Mahjong terms, so that's not so applicable here. So I knew I wanted to do that, and I found this visual novel, and it fits fantastically. But I don't have a background in studying Japan or Japanese culture or anything like that. So I knew I wanted to give myself a bit of a grounding in that, so that I didn't fuck it up in a colonialist manner. I wanted to not be British, which is coincidentally something I've felt a lot recently. And it's really good that I did, because I ended up looking a lot into horror film theory about Japan, and there's a lot of discussion there about making sure you don't look at, and I'm going to use America as the example here, but they mean any sort of Anglo-centric Western kind of media, or not even Anglo-centrics, but European would be included as well. A lot of scholars caution against thinking of Japan and America as not necessarily opposite, but different forms of horror, and contrasting, when in fact they're very intermingled. Mostly due to the intermingling of cultural influence during and after the Second World War, when, through occupation and people emigrating and repatriating, and that brought in a load of other different influences to Japan as well. There's then the issue of a lot of what we think of as Japanese is very specific to central Japan. And not only does that ignore the experiences of the sort of more eastern and more western Japan, those are also the places where a lot of the indigenous people of Japan live. So there's then an additional problem in that. So I got diverted studying all of this. Also, Japanese censorship history, very odd. Very interesting, and I'm not going to go into it here, but I ended up writing quite a lot about that probably won't go in the chapter, but it was good context. basically I have that grounding now, and it's now going, well, okay, what do I want to talk about in this? Because I didn't really have that in the write-up I did for this month, which I should add for context. This month's write-up I did in 3 days. It was 5,500 words. Don't ever do that. That's a terrible idea. Future me. Don't do that. I forgot how long it had been. So in these past 2 months, I completely re-edited, formatted, and finished all of the referencing for my existing 2 chapters, because that was, now I'm tipping into over halfway. That was something I wanted to go back and do, so it didn't, I didn't have to come back to it a couple of years from now and hate myself even more than I already do. And I'm glad I did that. I also had a week off because Dawn Trail released. And, then my usual time disruption through illness and heat waves and, that kind of thing. So I was surprised by when my supervision was, because I hadn't realised how much time had passed. And I try and send my write-ups, because I tend to do a write-up each supervision. Mine are every other month because I'm part-time. They would normally be every month for full-time PhDs at my institution. Your mileage may vary depending on where you are. And I try and send them in a week ahead of when the supervision is, because my supervisors are both very busy with, not teaching at this time of the year, but, work and admin and, trying to do the jobs of 5 people because everyone else in the department keeps getting fired. With compulsory redundancy, I should say, not with people doing anything wrong. The wrong thing they've chosen is being an arts and humanities researcher, unfortunately. So yeah, I try and send them in a week early. And I realised 8 days before my supervision that I had done no write-up. So I sent it in a little later than I would usually do, and also I did it all in 3 days, and I was very ill afterwards. Shocker. But as a result, I was very stressed about it. And I did find this supervision really difficult, not because my supervisors were horrible, they were absolutely wonderful, but it was very challenging. And it was partly challenging because it started with, are you okay with the riots that almost happened on our campus yesterday? Because it was the day after that, which wasn't helpful. And it ended with, we'll arrange the next supervision when we know if either of us has been given compulsory redundancy or not, which was also not the most wonderful thing. But it meant that I just felt like I didn't have the right answers during the supervision. And I think that's because of the stage of the research I'm at. But I find not knowing things really uncomfortable. You know how everyone has a recurring nightmare when they're a kid? Maybe not everyone. A lot of people have specific recurring nightmares. Mine is... This is so embarrassing. I am trying to work something out. It's not necessarily a mathematical problem, but it's got that feeling of I'm trying to find an answer, solve an equation, work out what something means, how a puzzle goes together. That kind of thing where you're on the edge of getting it, but you do not know what it is. And it's just such a visceral, intense version of that not knowing. And every time I would wake up having a panic attack. And I still get it sometimes, so I'm laughing in a self-deprecating defensive mechanism. So yeah, difficult supervision, not through any fault of mine or my supervisors. But we still had a really productive conversation. I really needed it to be over by the end because I could feel myself having to put more and more and more effort into masking. And then my ability to mask kind of failing. Because of that, my brain fog started going and I was losing track of where I was going with my talking, which normally I can do quite fluidly, but I just it was just going there. So I don't feel like it was my best supervision, and that's making moving on with this current bit of research very hard. However, and I realise I've talked for nearly 20 minutes now and I haven't even got to the thing I was going to talk about yet, but it is here now. We are getting there. So basically they want me to think about some whys. So why visual novels in relation to madness? How does madness figure in them? What is the work that madness is doing in those visual novels? Because one of the things we talked about was madness as metaphor or subject. Because there's some complicated ways in which the mad encounter or the disability encounter more widely are used in genre fiction, especially, which Ria Shane wrote about in Disability and Genre, which is one of like the 2 key texts that I'm using for inspiring my thesis. And yeah, what is new and interesting in here? What role does the sociocultural stuff play? What's the role of madness and taboo here, especially in terms of Song of Sire, which has a lot of taboo crossing stuff in it. And yeah, but like, what story am I telling with this chapter? Because in constructing my thesis, I've drawn on my experience writing novels for a lot of it and writing fan fiction as well. And thought about the structure of each chapter in that way, and like through lines and what order chapters go in, and that's very helpful to me to think of things that way. And so yeah, that's where I am at the moment, and I don't have the answers, and that is very hard, and I don't really know. Where do I start with this? Which is why I'm just here and talking. And as I said, I've not prepared this at all. You saw how much of a mess I was an hour and a half ago. I'm trying to not rush myself and to go steadily through this. Sometimes when it gets like this, even opening this book is too overwhelming. As much as I love my PhD, it can overwhelm me in the same way that anything can, and it has been very hard with the heat wave and my pain being a lot worse, and I have trouble managing myself in heat and dealing with all sorts of other things from my wonderful body. So I think I probably will actually leave it there, and next time, which I might film tomorrow, I might film a week from now, I don't know, I will start looking at, what the answers to those questions could be. But this is the reality of this journey, which is that sometimes I just stare at a book and I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And I pay to do this. Let's not even bring that into the equation, because that will make it even worse. So yes, I'm going to leave it there. And as I say, I'll be back and we'll have another talky session, more than a talky vlog rather than a vloggy vlog, where we'll have a look at all of that. But for now, thank you very much for being here and listening to me. And Mr. and I hope you're having an okay week. I will see you all soon. Bye bye.